Okay. Good morning, everybody. I've got one more to let in the door. I said that, and then there was another. It's always the same when it's a busy webinar this morning. I think we're sorted. Right, I'm going to make a start. So good morning, my name is Nicola Johnson. I'm the Training Development Scientist with IWater, and I'm also an Eastern Area member as well. And I'm really delighted to invite you to this webinar this morning on the Beginner's Guide to Chloramination, the Principles, Monitoring and Control, held by the Eastern Area. And we've got Bart and Claire on the line who I know are ready to go. Just a quick reminder though, before we go any further, this is an Eastern Area one, and we are very lucky this year to actually have 8 sponsors: Claret Civil Engineering, Anglian Water, Merit Skills, Clancy, AC Contracting Group, Kier, RSC and Windmill Insight Solutions. And without them and the help of our volunteers, these events just don't happen. There will be an opportunity for questions today at the end of the session, so you can use the Q&A function, and chat is enabled as well. So if you're having any technical problems, do let me know. And I'll just highlight at this point, there are a couple of other webinars coming up in October that you may be interested in as well. One on Streetworks UK on the material classification protocol, and that's available to book now. And the same with the WaterAid Climate Resilient Wash as well. But I know there's going to be lots of questions on this one, so I'm very conscious I want to hand over as quickly as I can to Claire Lipsett and Bart Verdonk. So I'm going to hand over to Claire, and she's going to pop it into share. And I'm going to go quiet.
Nicola, let me just turn sound on. Top. Right. Let me know when you can see that in full screen. Hopefully it's a bit slow today.
It's Monday.
Yeah, so hopefully that's the landing slide. Is that what you can see, Nicola?
Yep, it's now in full screen.
Yes.
Brilliant. So thank you very much for the introduction, Nicola. Yeah, we're going to go through kind of a beginner's guide to chloramination, some of the principles, a little bit about monitoring and why control is important. A big thank you to Institute of Water for hosting this as a seminar. We at Hach have been supporting clients in the last couple of years around monochloramine, and we have seen the conversation grow quite exponentially in the last 3 years, and kind of the training element forms part of that conversation. So we saw an opportunity here to provide a little bit more knowledge into the subject, and to kind of close some of those gaps where people have questions. My name is Claire Lipsett. I'm the Municipal Account Manager for the East Anglia region of the UK. Bart, can you introduce yourself?
Thank you, Claire. Yes. Good morning, everyone. My name is Bart Verdonk. I'm from the European Application Development Managers team. So we are active in whole Europe. I live in the Netherlands. That's where I'm based. And my expertise is in the drinking water application. So in my role, I am supporting our European sales teams as a subject matter expert on drinking water projects and questions, provide trainings also internally, and active also on trade shows and conferences. And Claire and myself were also very often active on chloramination and projects in here. So also thank you from my side for being here today and talking about chloramination. Yes.
Brilliant. Thanks, Bart. I'm going to go through the slides now. There is a Q&A opportunity at the end. So if I could ask, if you have any questions that come up, please feel free to pop them into the chat, and we will circle back at the end. Otherwise, there'll be a small session where we can answer those. In terms of a quick agenda, really brief introduction to Hach, followed by a little bit of the status quo on disinfection in the UK in particular. We'll then go into the technical part of chloramination principles, and how we control them and monitor. And then we've got a couple of client case studies from recent applications, and then there's that Q&A session at the end. Looking into Hach quickly, we've been around quite a long time. We were founded in 1933. We are an instrument provider and solutions provider to the water industry, both industrial and municipal. We've got about 4,000 employees globally. Here are all kind of our R&D and our production facilities. All of our instruments are made in-house by us. So yeah, we're not intermediaries. We design, make, research, and the applications of our instruments ourselves. So sessions like this are really important for us to understand what the need is in the market and where we can assist. I form part of the municipal team. There are 7 Claie equivalents up and down the country that all look after their municipal water accounts. We've got everybody from Hannah looking after Scottish Water to Russ in the south looking after Thames Water. If you have any questions or you'd like more information, you're welcome to connect with either Bart or I, or if you know who your account manager is, please feel free to reach directly to them. In terms of in the UK, we've got our own application development team. There are 8 specialists there that are out in the field assisting clients with their projects. We've also got 20 in-house service technicians that's responsible for servicing our instrument base. And then we've got an in-house spares and maintenance support for keeping our instruments healthy. Bart forms part of the European application development team, and they're really important for us, particularly in monochloramine, because he's got a global application base, including references. So we're able to kind of bounce ideas off him and look at case studies of similar applications to ensure that you're getting the best monitoring solution for your site. In terms of our instrument range, we do everything from abstraction, so surface water, borehole abstraction, also desalination, seawater abstraction, all the way through your water treatment process. So that's solid stability, organic, COD, all your nutrient analyzers, your eChem as well. So you're looking at pH and conductivity. And then most importantly for us today, we're looking at the section prior to distribution, where you have your disinfection and your storage of your water, and then beyond into your distribution network as well, which is equally as important. Okay, disinfection in the UK. I think if you talk to anyone about UK disinfection, they immediately refer to chlorine. This remains the most widely used disinfectant, not only in the UK, but globally as well. It's a highly effective disinfectant, and you have the benefit of a direct measurement. This is our DR300 powder pillow tester. It's typically used for the distribution network, where you use a little pillow, you get a pink color change, and it tells you immediately what your chlorine residual is. It's fairly low cost. And the nice thing about chlorine is it's a synergistic disinfectant, meaning that it works hand in hand with other disinfectants as well, such as ozone and UV. It's got a very broad application. Chlorine itself is quite pH dependent. So something we need to take into consideration when we use chlorine in our network is the pH of your water. And there's a shift when you go below pH 7.5 of more hypochlorous acid, and above 7.5 you tend to get the hypochlorite ion. The issue you have in this particular application is drinking water can vary around that neutral pH, and there is quite a big reduction in efficiency of chlorine as you go over that 7.5 mark. So you do tend to find systems that are that have any kind of ingress of organic matter or have debris in the pipelines. You will get that slightly alkali effect, and then you have a lack of potency of your chlorine, and it's something to bear in mind when you're choosing your disinfectant. Other limitations of chlorine dosing: back in the day, we used to dose with chlorine gas canisters, and there's a very large health and safety requirement around the movement and the replacement of those canisters. In more recent times, there's a lot of research going into disinfectant byproducts. These are compounds that are made when your chlorine reacts with organic matter in your system, and it creates secondary products. And some of those products have health risks, including carcinogens. So there's a lot of research going into DPPs at the moment associated with chlorine dosing. As we look at our networks having aging infrastructure, leak detection, replacement of pipes, the chance of organic ingress has increased in recent years. And depending on your area of the UK, this is something that's really prominent in my region. We have quite long distribution networks from the water treatment facility to points of use. And that can cause issues if you've got chlorine residual, because it can deteriorate by the time you get to those far users. I'm also in a coastal region, and we have peak and off-peak demand depending on whether the tourists are in town, and that can make chlorine dosing also a little bit tricky. So chloramination, this brings us on to kind of an alternate disinfection method. Chloramination's been around since the 1920s. It's not a new disinfectant by any means. It was really popular in the UK during the Second World War in particular, and that was due to kind of breaks in our pipeline during bombing periods. When pipelines got broken, then they saw chloramine as a more resilient disinfectant that could allow those water networks to continue to operate. It was accepted as a compound onto the UK regulatory framework in 1989. It's quite common in industrial networks. It's not something that's only used for municipal, particularly because it targets Legionella and Pseudomonas control. So it's used in kind of cooling towers and cooling systems in particular on industrial applications. And we, particularly at Hach, have seen an exponential growth in recent years of drinking water applications using monochloramine as the preferred disinfectant of choice. First thing is for me to apologise for the age of this map. We've pulled it from source data of 2009 from the Drinking Water Inspectorate. There's not a huge amount of data around the distribution of monochloramine in the UK, but essentially we know that there are 14 water companies that have used monochloramine either currently or in the past, and we are aware that there are areas where this is growing. A good example was the presentation of this graph a year ago at the WRC, and somebody in the room said Glasgow's just this week moved over from chlorine to chloramination. So we put the Glasgow dot on this map. Part of our mandate at Hach is to look at improving this map going forward and getting a more firm picture as to where chloramination is taking place. But I think it's important to note it is up and down the country. There are areas in almost every water company. And what we're finding now, as we're moving into AMP8, there is a spirit of collaboration and sharing between water companies. And we are finding companies who have not got a monochloramine strategy engaging with us on monitoring of monochloramine because they're sharing water with a neighbour who has a chloramination strategy.
How are you?
Ooh, someone needs to go on mute, please. So, chloramination, what are we talking about when we use it's a broad phrase, chloramination. So, chloramine, monochloramine, chloramination are three different ways of saying exactly the same thing. And that can be confusing, particularly when you're on site and everyone kind of has a different pet name. But essentially, you are talking about a mixture of chlorine and ammonia atoms together. In doing so, you are creating quite a powerful disinfectant. And importantly, this disinfectant is actually more stable in organic waters than chlorine is. You get more potency and you get a better residual in your line. It has better targeting properties for key pathogens, and one of the key ones in the municipal distribution systems is biofilms. It's really good at suppressing biofilm formation, and that tends to form when you have like low-level organics in your system. So yeah, we see areas where there are biofilms switch over to monochloramine. Really important for the management of chloramination, there are three compounds. You have mono, di, and tri. Mono, you're essentially taking an ammonia ion, and the blue molecule, that's your nitrogen, and the whites are your hydrogens. And you find an atom of hydrogen is released, and chlorine bonds to that atom, and that's a monochloramine molecule with just one chlorine atom attached. You find for dichloramine, you have two chlorine atoms bonded to that ammonia, And for your trichloramine, you have three chlorines attached to your ammonia. So you've lost the hydrogen completely. What's really important is the compound that is approved for human consumption is monochloramine only. So your mixing ratio of your chlorine to your ammonia is really important, and the control around ensuring that you stay in the monochloramine zone, you don't overdose your chlorine, is key to that. For anyone who's been swimming recently and you walk into a swimming pool and you get that very potent smell of chlorine, that does tend to be dichloramine or trichloramine formation. They've overdosed the chlorine to ensure their water's disinfected. The water is disinfected, but it's not very nice to drink. You can get itchy eyes, you can get scratchy throats. There are some health concerns there. So it's really important that we maintain the mixing ratio in the monochloramine range at all times. In terms of your two options between chlorine and chloramine, sorry, there are very similar pros and cons. Actually, they're both very good disinfectants. They both target bacteria. They have slightly different key target areas, but the most important one for chloramine is that it doesn't react with any organic matter that has ingressed into your pipeline, and you get that long distance disinfection property, which is very key to some water companies. We're going to get a little bit technical now on the curve. You cannot talk about monochloramine without talking about the chlorination curve. It's key to how you dose chloramination. There is a video coming up in a moment that will explain this quite nicely, but I'll just try to take you through it. If you look at the red line is the most important one. This is your chlorine added versus your chlorine residual. Your chlorine ion actually responds differently in the presence of ammonia. You get this rapid uptake at the beginning, and at the peak at the top, that's what we call the breakpoint between region 1 and region 2. Our safe zone for monochloramine is in region 1. Once you go into region 2, that's your dichloramine zone, and region 3 is your trichloramine zone. To put a number on it, region 1 is 0 to 5. So we want our monochloramine to be below 5 to be safe. Once you go over that hill at the top and you start going into region 2, you are forming dichloramines. What is important on this chlorination curve as well is the interaction between ammonia, total ammonia is in black, and free ammonia is in blue. Those 3 points tell you where you are on the curve. So it's very difficult to know where you are on the chlorination curve from just one parameter. You have to kind of understand the interaction between the three, and hopefully the video I'm going to show you now will explain that nicely. We have a video available on YouTube, which is quite a nice training video. It's just 4 minutes long, and it talks you through that atomic interaction on a monochloramine. And I'm hoping if I hit this button, it'll work with sound. Let's try it.
There's no sound, Claire.
You might just need to reshare your screen with include sound. That's usually when it doesn't work.
I thought it might happen. Yeah, I did click
Just
it
on the
earlier
share
on, but
button.
it seems to have
Turned itself off again. Yeah, happens.
right. Just 1 second. Try again. Oh, this is the only bit that I was nervous about in this. Just 1 second. Read the sound. Oh, it kicked me out completely. My apologies.
We can hear sound at the moment.
Yeah. Do you want me to share, Claire? Or it's already there.
No, it's fine. It's coming up now.
Okay. Otherwise, I can do it for you if you want.
Likewise, I've teed it up on my screen if we need it.
Yeah, I can hear the sound now.
Can you hear it now?
Yes. Yeah.
Perfect. Make it full screen. There we go. Hopefully you can still hear it.
Yes.
Thank you.
To understand chlorine and chloramine control, let's start with a simple line that shows measured chlorine levels and the amount of chlorine that is added to the water. Dosing and measuring chlorine, you overcome your chlorine demand, and as a result, you see chlorine building in the graph. To explain this concept, we will use a closed system, a bucket of water without the presence of ammonia. As we add chlorine to the water, it is used up at first as it reacts with the existing matter in the water, for example, bacteria. So we do not measure much, if any, chlorine. But eventually the chlorine added has exceeded the demand and we measure more chlorine, as is indicated by the graph in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. When you chloraminate, you add chlorine to water with existing ammonia, or dose both chlorine and ammonia together, or you can add ammonia to water that has already been chlorinated in the treatment plant or another utility. In this example, let's pretend we are adding chlorine to water that already has ammonia. When ammonia is added to chloraminating systems or is present in the system, our graph changes, pushing up the amount of matter the chlorine has to bond with initially. This creates what is known as the chloramination curve. You are trying to create monochloramine. The ammonia drops a hydrogen atom and the chlorine takes its place. When you have effectively bonded one chlorine molecule with each ammonia, you have achieved the ideal state of monochloramine disinfectant. If you continue to dose chlorine past this state, you begin to experience di- and finally trichloramination. These states are not ideal. It causes your chlorine residual to drop radically, although you are adding more chlorine. You will experience taste and odor issues when you are in this zone, and your disinfecting power is drastically cut. Once you pass the point where you have fully bonded all the nitrogen from the ammonia with the chlorine, you return to the original chlorine curve, where for every part of chlorine you dose, you will see 1 part of chlorine residual. Let's take a moment to make an important differentiation. What is the difference between free and total chlorine? Free chlorine refers to both hypochlorous acid and the hypochlorite ion, or bleach, and is the form of chemical commonly added to water systems for disinfection. When ammonia is also present, monochloramine, dichloramine, and trichloramine will form, as we saw. Chloramines are also known as combined chlorine. Total chlorine is the sum of free chlorine and combined chlorine. The level of total chlorine will always be higher than or equal to the level of free chlorine. So how do you know where your utility's water lies on this chart? Some simple measurements can tell you. For instance, in zone 1 you will see total chlorine and a presence of free ammonia. In zone 2 you will see total chlorine, monochloramine, total ammonia, but no free ammonia. In zone 3, you will see no ammonia and only chlorine, and your free and total chlorine values should be very similar or match. If you know the key parameters to look for in each section, it is easy to determine where you are on the chloramination curve. So does this change if your utility adds ammonia to water that has already been chlorinated, as many do? The concepts all stay the same. You just move backwards along the line. Ammonia is added to the chlorinated water just prior to entrance into the distribution system. The dose is increased until a small trace of free ammonia is detected, ensuring you are in zone 1 and maximum monochloramine residual has been reached. To determine where on the chloramination or chlorine curve your utility is, or for more information, please visit hach.com/chloramination.
Right, we got there in the end. Oh, no, get it twice now. Okay, so there is complexity in monitoring chloramine, even though we know what it is and we know what kind of ionic state we're looking for. There does need to be some control in order to ensure that we stay in that monochloramine region. So if we look at the simplistic chloramination curve, which looks kind of like a disfigured S, you've got your zone 1 and you've got your zone 2 where you have dichloramine formation, and you've got your zone 3. If, for example, you were looking to achieve a chlorine dose in the region of 4 to 5, which is right before the hill of your change from monochloramine to dichloramine, it can be tricky to know whether you're in that region or not using a chlorine reading. What we typically see on sites is chlorine readings of between 1 and 2, which is quite common for that residual. However, in this case, a reading of, for example, 1.8, you could be in the monochloramine zone, you could be in the dichloramine zone where you've gone over that peak, and similarly, you could be in the trichloramine zone. That chlorine reading in itself is not enough to tell you where you are and if your water is safe for human consumption. So to control monochloramine, we use a free chlorine measurement and we use a free ammonia measurement to determine that we're in that first zone. However, this method is very indirect and it's risky. It kind of ignores your bound ammonia, it ignores your bound chlorine, and it gives you no visual as to where you are on this curve. It's a calculation that you do manually, and there's also potential of human error in that. And very importantly, what about the distribution network? We're forgetting that monochloramine is going into a network that typically is controlled and needs to be measured as well. There's also complexity in the way that we dose chloramination. So, for example, if you have a site that has residual chlorine and you're injecting ammonia to achieve chloramination, there is a measurement of free chlorine residual before you inject the ammonia, and there's a measurement of both total chlorine, monochloramine, and free ammonia prior to distribution. It changes if you are dosing both chemicals at once. So if you have a site that has no disinfection and they're putting both chemicals in at the same time, there's no opportunity between the chlorine and the ammonia to do any testing. You have to rely on a policing monitor on the back end of your system prior to distribution to tell you your total chlorine, monochloramine, and free ammonia ratios. And then there's not really an opportunity to adjust if there is any concerns here. The third situation is if you have a booster station, as many of our sites do, you're receiving water that is chloraminated quite a distance away. There will be a top-up of ammonia and chlorine at this site to ensure that that residual is correct. That relies on a lot of instrumentation. So you've got your raw coming in with your chlorine, ammonia, and monochloramine. There's a mixing zone in the middle where you'll probably measure again, and then there's your final zone before you go into distribution. So yeah, it's multiple monitoring points to get one disinfection essentially. And then one that we've started to see this year where companies are sharing water resources. You have to remove chloramination from your system if you have a chlorine strategy. So you'll be measuring the presence of monochloramine coming into your system. You'll be injecting sufficient chlorine to get that residual up to a point where you can measure a residual free and total chlorine going into your distribution system. So different setups depending on how you make or how you receive your incoming water at your site. So how do we manage this? Your current chloramination monitoring, typically in very simplistic form, you will have a free and total chlorine monitor coming in, and you'll have an ammonia monitor like our Amtax unit prior to your dosing system, be it a top-up or injection of both of those chemicals. You will then have exactly the same on the back end of your system. So you're looking at 6+ instruments to get your one reading. It's a complex calculation based on at least 3 instruments before and at least 3 instruments after. You're going to do an indirect measurement, and you're going to manually calculate where you think you are on the curve based on the interaction of those 3 numbers. You're going to look after 6 instruments for one monochloramine measurement. There are phenomenons of at very low ranges of instruments falling to sleep or having low residual values that are actually errors at those very low ranges. So that can throw off your ratio almost immediately. And importantly, because you're doing a manual calculation of 3 instruments, you don't actually have any process control. You're unable to kind of link that number to your distribution pumps, for example. Say you get a spike in chlorine. A spike in chlorine is okay if you have a spike in ammonia at the same time. The two will cancel each other out. You can't do it on one or the other. It has to be the combination of the two. And again, as said before, you don't get distribution network monitoring from this method. A few years ago, we launched the AMC 550 analyzer. This is an analyzer that measures the monochloramine method directly. It gives you a direct number where you are on that curve as a number of all of those interactions together. It will measure your free ammonia, your total ammonia, and your monochloramine number all in one measurement. It includes grab sample functionality. So next to the digital screen is a little sample pot. So if you're on site and you want to use one instrument and check another area or part of your distribution network, you can pour a sample into there and it'll tell you directly where you are on the monochloramine curve. And we do single and dual channel. So before and after your makeup system can actually go through the same monitor. So what we find on sites that have installed this unit, they will typically still have their free and total chlorine before and after makeup, but they've then switched to a monochloramine analyzer that brings them that process control because it tells you where you are on the curve. And for very optimum dosing, you will actually find sites don't have 2 monitors. They just go to the dual channel single monitor and have everything going through one monitor for that total visibility. If you look at the AMC analyzer, it's got 2 testing cells, one that will do ammonia measurements and then one that does monochloramine measurements. And then the free ammonia is calculated as the difference between the two. Your display screen at the top, there's your total ammonia, your monochloramine is second, your free ammonia is your calculation. But really importantly for control, that bottom number 3.8, that is telling you which region you are on of that monochloramine curve. And we want to be in the 4 to 5 number range to make sure that we are making monochloramine, not dichloramine. So this will tell you that exactly, and you can take that last parameter, that 3.8, and you can link that to your distribution pumps to effectively have control if you have an issue in your dosing system. To add to that, we've got an instrument called the SL1000. It's known as the ChemKey unit. This is used in our distribution networks. It's got 4 slots underneath and 2 probes that fit in the top. And you select what parameters you want to test based on which keys go into the bottom of the unit. It can do 4 simultaneously. So for monochloramine testing, we will do a monochloramine, an ammonia, chlorine and pH possibly, sometimes nitrates if you're worried about biofilm. But importantly, these are barcoded, pre-filled cassettes that you put into the bottom of your unit, just like that. And you can see on the screen, it tells you all 4 of those parameters at the same time in 3 minutes. So this is used to kind of couple with your process unit in order to give you that visibility of your monochloramine degradation through your system. Couple of case studies now just to finish off. The first one is a UK municipal application. Apologies, the picture is a little bit dark, but these are underground storage reservoirs. I think they were built in the 60s or the 70s, very large capacity. This region receives pre-chlorinated water from another region pumped across, and then they then dose with ammonium sulfate on site to give them that monochloramine residual. The site is a really active site, really good staff, kind of really competent and really interested in their instruments and look after their instruments well. However, they had a prior incident of shutdown on the site due to dichloramine formation, and there was some investigation going on as to how that happened. They installed a monochloramine monitor on their final water, so after dosing, to ensure that they had the correct mixing ratio. They were able to see readings every 15 minutes, so live data, bearing in mind the chlorine coming in from another region may vary slightly. So it gave them that feedback and that confidence that they were achieving the right point on the curve. What was really interesting is when we installed this instrument, you'll see by the data log on the right, it gave us ammonia, monochloramine and free ammonia readings, and immediately went into a plus alarm state. And the plus alarm state at the bottom, where it's not giving us a ratio, is telling us that you're in the dichloramine, trichloramine part of the graph and that your ratio is incorrect. This conflicted with the raw data that was on the site. Their ammonia monitor in particular was telling them that they had sufficient ammonia. And we later found out that that ammonia reading was actually faulty. And it was the reason that the site was having issues with their monochloramine makeup. They were relying on instruments kind of interacting. And when one has an error, it throws your ratio off completely. So we put this unit in, we did some testing over the next 24 hours using that grab sample feature, and we discovered that they actually needed to add more ammonia, not pull back on their ammonia to bring them back up on the curve. So this instrument actually, from putting it in the first 24 hours, really kind of opened the eyes of the site as to where their errors were and what the concern was, and it immediately mitigated that risk that they had issues with prior. The second case study is also a municipal application. This is an interesting one for AMP8. It's a neighbouring water company that uses chlorination, taking water from a neighbour who uses chloramination. They needed to know what the incoming monochloramine ratio was in order to know how much chlorine to dose to get their residual. This is actually a really nice site. It's about a third of the instruments you can see on this screen. The whole wall is just an entire line of instruments start to finish, and it's set up really nicely from kind of raw all the way through to final. So you can kind of get the story of the whole site going along this panel. They wanted to do breakpoint removal of monochloramine by dosing chlorine, and they put a single unit on the incoming. So they had visibility of what their neighbour was doing. Obviously, not being in charge of the process, they had no way of knowing if any changes happened upstream. They gained that visibility through this instrument. They were able to have readings every 15 minutes and link that to process control, particularly around the dosing of the chlorine pumps. And through that feedback, they were able to optimize their chlorine dosing. They weren't just dosing based on flow control. They could do it directly on the ratio of the water they were receiving from their neighbour. So just in summary, really, there's your monochloramine molecule. The important thing is that it is an effective disinfectant, and it has really good residual properties, which is important for certain regions of the UK. It is a globally accepted method, and it has been around for many years. The mixing ratios are extremely important, and it's important there to exercise control and to mitigate your risks. You cannot dose monochloramine without kind of referring to the monochloramine curve. It gives you all the information that you need on the interaction and the zones where you're safe and the zones where you need to put in a correction to get back into the safe zone. It does not form DBPs or degrade over very long distances, which is the main benefit of monochloramine, especially as we're doing more research into DBPs now and the long-term effects of those. And importantly, if you have an area that's got organic ingress, even very low organics, you're kind of talking 25 milligrams per litre and below, you will get biofilms in your network, and monochloramine is really good at suppressing that. Just a final slide from me. These are the resources that I've shared with you today. There's a couple of links there. The first one to the portable analyzer that we use in the distribution network that can take up to 4 different keys at the same time. The second one is the link to the process instrument that we have many of these out in the field now, and they're working really nicely. The bottom link is to the video that I shared, and then there's a couple of case studies that Bart and I have worked on in the last couple of years to kind of help people do the comparison on monochloramine and where it fits in the market. And then there's Bart and I's contact details if you have any questions. And I think that's it.
That was brilliant, Claire.
I'm going to
Like
hop off the sharing.
Every good webinar needs a technical moment, and I have posted the video as well in chat, so if anybody did have any trouble with it, it is there. So you have a captive audience now with Bart and Claire. If there's any questions you'd like to ask, I did see one in chat, but it appears to have disappeared. So let's have a look. I see Bob's just morning, Bob. Bob, we're not.
Hi, Bob.
You want to come on camera, Bob? You're very welcome to. Might want to unmute as well. So I can see Bob's question there. Experience of DBT development and chlorinated distribution system, especially brominated derivatives. Do you see the same thing, and does chloramination avoid this?
Oh, that's a good one for Bart. Bart, are you with me?
Yeah, I'm just reading. I also had some technical issues, so I just opened the chat. So just to read the question again. Thanks, Bob, for asking. Develop over time. Yeah. That's a great question. I think that also relates to how the chloramines are being formed, whether it's in the drinking water production plant or booster station, or even boosting one of the two, or together chlorine and ammonia if needed in a later stage. I think it all relates to the effectiveness and the position on the curve itself, where you are in the system. So, and especially when we're talking about distribution systems, it's a very complex in matters in volume or distance, and also the need to monitor at various different spots to really understand the position on the curve and avoid any formation of byproducts where you can. So my answer would be we are seeing this quite often, this concern, and one of the answers is increasing also grab sample testing at wherever you can within the distribution system to have a better understanding. I hope this answers your question a bit. Yeah.
Thanks, Bart. Any questions? Anybody wants to put their hands up? They can come on camera. That's fine as well. But if you're feeling shy as well, you can type it in chat for me. I don't mind.
Sorry,
I don't
if I
mind.
Could just jump in a second and pick up on Bart's answer.
Yeah, of
There's
course.
a situation I was in. We were monitoring a long distribution system in Norfolk, funnily enough. And I worked for IWater, and the THM levels leaving the works were acceptable around the 60 microgram mark. What we noticed is towards the end of the distribution system, they started climbing, and there was definitely a move towards more brominated products, which we hadn't seen leaving the works. And all we concluded is, okay, it's chlorine reacting with organic matter. This was a while ago, when THMs first became an issue. If you can, probably before your time, Claire. But you know, if I've currently got a client who's wrestling with some THM issues, and if moving to chloramination chloramination in distribution could be a potential solution for them. But what I would have to be able to say is, look, if you switch to chloramination and get it right, you will not see the same DBP development. Yeah, and that was what I was hoping you'd be able to tell me.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, and thanks for clarifying as well. So, and I think it also really depends on the levels of free chlorine that are still in the system. And you're right. So over time, the longer contact time it has, there is a higher chance of DBP formation. So whenever it's possible to control this, to avoid any free chlorine residuals where you can, because
Yes.
and I think, yeah, so as far as we know it and learn it, monochloramine is affecting a much less DBP formation. It's also not a zero, I think. But any presence of free chlorine itself will only increase the chance of DBP formation. So,
yeah.
And that brings us back to the to the right control of the being on the right position of the curve.
I think that was why I said if you are effectively chloraminating, which is chloramine only, no free chlorine.
Yes.
So, you can't guarantee that you won't get DBP development, but you believe it will be a significantly lower level.
Yeah, yes,
okay.
Exactly.
That's fine. Thank you very much.
I think the other thing, to note, Bob, is that we talk a lot about kind of DBP and biofilm formation in the distribution networks, but there's not a huge amount of data there. So there's only a few kind of my clients that have TOC or organic monitoring through their distribution systems, and it doesn't take much. We're not talking high levels for those biofilms to spike. So it can be a single incident that actually causes a biofilm to form. Yeah, it's just that robustness that you don't have if you're using the chlorine side, especially if you don't have the data around how often, what's the frequency, how big are those peaks in TOC organics. We do have a couple of monitors, and it does vary. It's not one of the things that's hugely consistent, and it's particularly seasonal as well with your hot and cold temperatures. So there is definitely a gap in the data in the distribution systems from both sides, from monochloramine and chlorine in the presence of organics, debris, etc. It would be lovely to get some more information on that.
Okay, thank you very much. Right.
I can see another question in chat for you both. Yes. Can you, from Jonathan Bush, can you get nitrite formation as a byproduct of chloramination?
Great question. Yeah.
So that is a good question.
Yeah. So honestly, I do not have much experience there myself. I did read it because so we also do a lot of reading, and we're also trying to learn as good as we can from our US colleagues. I know it's a topic there sometimes. So well, my best answer here would be to confirm, it would be possible to form any nitrate combinations. If it's really nitrite, I'm not sure. I would have to ask, to be very honest. Yeah.
Fine, Bart. Is there anything you want to add to that one?
No, I think Bart summed
it. That's covered it. Lovely.
Yeah.
Great question.
It is a good question. I like it. Yeah. Any other questions? Just dropped out there. Okay. I think you might be off the hook with the questions, she says. Oh, yeah, that's fine. I thought it was another one, but it's not. Ignore me. I think on that case, I think it's time to let you both go. But I can safely say I've really enjoyed this webinar. And I think it is, we practice chlorination and angling water, and it's something I know that isn't as common. So it's something we do need to talk about more across the industry. Definitely. Brilliant. It just leaves me to thank Claire and to Bart as well for an excellent webinar. And we'll see you back in October with some of our future webinars, I hope, everybody. Other than that, have a good week, and I will see you all soon.
Thank you for organizing.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for listening.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.